From the southeastern corner of western North Carolina, this is Folklore. I'm your host, James Hernishin. There's a long list of people who went above and beyond in the hours and days after Tropical Storm Helene smashed into the Blue Ridge Mountains. For some communities in Polk County, that list is dominated not by first responders and other government employees who are paid to help when disaster strikes, because so many of them were trapped at home by blocked or washed out roads, but by those who could get out, and those who had the rescue skills and the equipment the rest of us needed. Among that list are a group of whitewater paddlers who quickly recognized just how devastating the storm had been for both the people who live along the Green River and the river itself. The new MountainTrue office in Saluda became a crucial staging ground for dozens of volunteer relief teams. That response, by people whose primary relevant qualification was just their knowledge of the river, seemed astonishing to me. At least it did until I talked with Chris Wing, founder of the H2O Dreams paddling school and one of the leaders of those relief efforts. But as you'll hear, what happened when the kayaking community stepped in where others couldn't makes a good deal of sense. The Green is known around the world for its challenging whitewater. Guiding paddlers, both expert and amateur, down the upper and lower stretches has become an economic engine for our county. Why wouldn't people whose lives and livelihoods are intimately connected to the geography of the river do whatever they could in a time of crisis? Before we get to the interview, though, I'm going to play some sounds I captured earlier the same day. First, here's what it's supposed to sound like standing on the banks of the Green. And here's what it actually sounds like these days. The heavy equipment working to restore Green River Cove Road to something approaching normal is going to be there for a long time. What Jake Jarvis and his precision grading crews are doing is remarkable, but the scale and scope of the work required is staggering, and only a tiny fraction of the debris has been cleared. It's going to take years and a lot of money. Meanwhile, MountainTrue is still organizing cleanup crews on the Green. On Saturday, December 14th, 2.5 months after the storm, Green River keeper Erica Shanks marshaled about 40 paddlers and other volunteers for yet another day of picking up garbage and debris. Here she is instructing the group.
So I want to just make sure of that. Also, if you don't have the proper gloves or something to pick up big metal straps, we don't want you getting cut for that today. So, be mindful of that. If you have to leave something due to safety, that is not obviously the end of the world. We want you to think about that. So we'll start here. The thing about up at the second bridge is it really can kind of only maybe handles one car, because you're going to have to find a spot to pull off on the side of the road, which is a little bit tricky. So we want to pull off, but we don't want to be in the way of the big trucks that are coming.
Then we all headed down Holbert Cove Road toward Lake Alger, turned left at the Silver Creek Baptist Church Cemetery, and then headed back up Green River Cove Road to the Big Rock access, where Erica gave us more tips. Chris and I then sat on the tailgate of his pickup for our conversation. You'll hear some noises in the background from chainsaws and wood being tossed around as the cleanup teams did their thing. I could have edited most of it out, but that seemed like I'd be missing the point. Chris Wing, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, James. I'm really excited.
This is the second of 2 episodes I'm doing on the consequences of Tropical Storm Helene. I don't think a lot of people in Polk County know about you, though. So introduce yourself. Tell me about how you came to be in this part of the world and what you've been doing the last few years, and then we'll talk about the storm.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Well, again, thank you for having me. I've been a resident of Polk County for about 9 years and just recently moved to Boone, North Carolina, where I was a student and now I'm faculty there at Appalachian State University. The long and the short of it is I moved to North Carolina in 2005 from Cleveland, Ohio, for whitewater kayaking specifically. So I moved down here to work at the Nanahill Outdoor Center, and then moved on from there to the U.S. National Whitewater Center in Charlotte. And in 2012, started my own paddling school called the H2O Dreams Paddling School. And it was kind of a truck and trailer operation for several years, and was really looking for a place to kind of put some roots down. And the Green River here in Saluda, North Carolina made a lot of sense. And the community members here were very open to receiving us. And I also, there was a lot of admiration for the folks that were kind of the pioneers in the area too. So it felt right to move here. It's been a great place to watch the paddling school thrive, but also see the community thrive around the river as well, and get to know the community members. I have a near and dear friend, Erica Shanks, who's the Green River keeper. Some of my best friends in the world are from this area. And I will say Saluda, North Carolina and Polk County holds a very special place in my heart. So like I said, I'm currently in Boone, North Carolina, about to embark on another journey, pursuing a PhD. Basically, I'm a lifelong student. That's why I like teaching, and that's why I like learning. So I'm fortunate that I've got a really great team of folks here to continue on with the paddling school. But it was time for me to kind of turn over a new leaf too, and continue to progress personally. So that's why I find myself in Boone, North Carolina now.
Well, what are you doing there?
So I'm currently an adjunct professor and a researcher in their kinesiology program. So one of the things about whitewater kayaking and in kind of sports in general, I was always kind of involved with sports as a kid. I was probably that hyperactive kid, undiagnosed ADHD kind of thing. But I did really well when I was active, and it didn't make a difference. It could have been, painting a picture. It could have been, going for a run, but I liked moving my body. And the big thing about, coaching whitewater paddling is that as I went deeper and deeper down that rabbit hole, the more and more I realized I knew so little is really what it is. Like, I think the saying is the more you learn, the less you know. So I was really seeking out a new community of mentors to where I could continue to push my knowledge. And physiology was that arena. There's kind of a side note there too. I was also the often overused injured athlete because I would never be able to stop. So a lot of my research is focused on overtraining and kind of preventing people from burnout, really. So that's why I'm in Boone, North Carolina now.
But you're not burned out.
No, well, it depends on what you ask about. Like, there's some things that I'm burnt out on for sure. It's easy. Like I tend to overdo it is really what it comes down to. And I think as I've aged in the sport too, I've learned to moderate that a lot more. And I'm thankful for that. Like, I think, that whole, you hear it a lot. As you age, you slow down. And it's like, for me, it was getting it's having the conversation with myself to be like, it's okay to take a rest day, right? Like, it's okay to also want rest and ask for rest. So no, I'm not burnout currently. Like, I would actually say that I'm in a spot right now where I'm energized, and, I'm finding passion again. And, paddle sports did that for me for 25 years. But I was overworked in a lot of ways, and it was taking its toll on my body in some ways. And I wanted to save some of that for me too. But again, it led to my research, which is, again, focused in burnout, overtraining, things like that. I had a mentor say this recently, research is me search. A lot of your research tends to be in line with your personal experience. So, and that's definitely true in my case.
Okay, but there was an unanticipated confluence of your personal experience and your research
Yes.
about 2.5 months ago.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, so where were you when Helene hit?
So I was actually in Boone at the time. We were in the middle of our semester there. Again, having some experience with, not some experience, a lot of experience with watching rain and its effects on rivers and everything else in terms of flow. That's part of being a paddler, is being able to figure out where the flow is so you can go paddle it. The forecasting and the modeling that we have nowadays is so profound. Like it's amazing. It really is cool. So to see what they were forecasting for where rivers would crest and how that continued to rise as the storm kind of kept inching closer and closer. And that we're just talking about Helene itself. Like we already had a cold front moving through, right? That dumped a considerable amount of rain on us. So it was just one of those moments where you kind of sit back and you go, this is going to be big. And I don't think anybody, you hear it almost to a point of being cliche now, nobody was ready for it. You couldn't be. You couldn't be ready for how it was geologic, right? It changed the shape of the earth. So yeah, I was sitting in Boone. Leading up to that, I was, I think the day before the storm hit, I gave my students the day off because I figured the weather was going to get bad, and the university hadn't canceled yet. But I woke up the morning that Helene actually started moving into the area. I think I woke up at about 5 a.m. The wind was really, it was something.
I think we all basically woke up at 5 o'clock that morning.
Yeah, 5 o'clock. Well, and I woke up at 5 because of the wind, and then I immediately got out of bed because I still had power, and I made a pot of coffee, which was the first right thing I did that day. So I made that pot of coffee and went back and I laid in bed and just sat on my computer and was watching, forecast and the radar. It was again, you had this ominous feeling that something very big was happening. And it was around 8 a.m. that I started hearing trees outside of my house falling. And we had it was around 5 to 8 large trees that came across our driveway and blocked us in. And then we lost power shortly thereafter. I somehow still had cell phone service, and our landlord, where our Riverside outpost is John Grace, and John sent me some photos. I think it was around 9:30, and the photos were of the outpost about halfway underwater. And our outpost is situated about 15, 16 feet off the normal river level. And we know that there was always going to be a chance of it being underwater. In fact, days prior, we had already battened down the hatches, moved all the really important stuff above the 100-year floodplain. Kayaks are going to get wet.
Okay, well, where is the outpost? Or was?
The outpost is on the Green River, right alongside the road, just downstream of Fish Top access.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and it's across the street from what is known as the Ranch, which is where the Green River Narrows Race Festival is held, and it's been a great home for us. It's made so much sense to be there. And again, when we designed the outpost, everything's kind of mobile or modular, so we can move things around or move it out. And we had everything chained to trees, and John went and checked in on it, and he was really satisfied with what he was seeing. Yeah, we felt really prepared. It was only maybe the night before where we started to feel like, the uh-oh was starting to come. But when I received those photos, my heart immediately sank. I was overwhelmed with grief, first and foremost. We were the epitome of a small business. We started in a Ford Taurus. There was only 2 of us. It was a hustle. Everything was a hustle. So, when you look at photos of, what took 13, 14 years to build, and then suddenly to see it, proverbially and maybe literally all gone in just one fell swoop, it was dramatic. And I called my parents almost immediately. I sent the photos to them, and it's just, they talked me down. And then as parents do, they talk to me right back up, because they're like, well, did you think about, or can you do this? Like, and I'm just like, I can't think about any of these things right now, right? Like, I'm still shell shocked. That's essentially what it was.
How long did it take before you got down here from Boone?
Yeah, so I didn't know if I was even going to make it. Once the storm kind of subsided up in Boone, I have a good friend up there. I went and checked in on him. I kind of drove around town just to kind of assess everything. And the university's got such a large infrastructure that a lot of things were being taken care of so quickly. You didn't understand how profound it was in those areas too. Like, all you needed to do was get off the main drag, like out of the university area, which I did not do. And it became abundantly clear, like, how bad it was everywhere. It wasn't just us here in Polk County experiencing it. It was up in, Watauga, Avery County. You hear about it in Spruce Pine and Burnsville and, Chimney Rock and those areas. And it was profound everywhere. But as soon as I was waiting to hear from the university as to whether or not they were going to continue classes or not. And they were pretty quick. Saturday afternoon, they canceled classes, and they said indefinitely with with a future update. And as soon as I learned that, I left that night, because this was where I needed to be. This is where I belonged at that point in time, especially with something as big as this. And I got in touch with our operations manager, Jordan McDaniel, and I went, his house is in Greenville, and I stationed with him. And what we were understanding is that there was nothing up here, no power, fuel, like grocery stores were closed, everything was just shut down. And that folks were going to be in pretty immediate need. And that there were folks, I had friends down here in the Cove that were also trapped. And every now and again you would get a message. It was very, very seldom though. It was like you get one message a day, and then you get one piece of the story. And it's a very small piece when you think of how much was going on in that timeline.
I think that one of the things that a lot of people are going to remember about this, in terms of like their world shifting understanding of things, is how fragile the communication systems we have are. And because, people in Saluda, after the storm went through, we just were walking around with our dogs and looking in on neighbors and thinking, it's a beautiful day, and how bad can things really be? We'll just clean up this stuff. And we had no idea what was going on in the coves, in the valleys where all that water was getting funneled, right?
Yeah.
So we really had no idea. The communication system completely collapsed.
Yeah.
So how long before you were able to actually, get on scene on the green and find out what really was happening?
One of the people that I touched base with was Erica Shanks. Social media became this massive, social media really shows what its strengths are in situations like this. Folks started kind of posting up. I remember posting up about, we have a trailer full of equipment down in the Cove. If you need it, contact me. I'll give you the lock codes and everything. And was able to relay that on to some folks. But Erica was one of the first people I talked with, and she was up, I'm trying to remember, she was at a Waterkeepers conference, and she was on her way back. And she goes, listen, if you're gonna start organizing people, I've got a space we can do it at. Why don't we meet at my office? And we met at her office on Sunday. So I was here, again, Saturday night in Greenville. Sunday, we went down to Charlotte to buy supplies. We filled up my truck full of supplies. We had several other trucks with fuel, food, all this other stuff coming up the hill. And the plan was to meet at Erica's office and use that as a hub to either disperse ourselves or to have people come. We didn't have a game plan per se, but we knew that we had a start and we needed to just start doing something. As far as eyes on the green, the need that became abundantly clear for us is you mentioned communications. That's where I'm good. I'm good at logistics and communications. So I immediately hit social media. I started fundraising. I was organizing folks coming up the hill with supplies. Erica was working with reaching out to local fire departments and understanding where the most we were saying immediate and urgent and emergent needs were. because in that first week, everything is super tenuous and unstable, right? So our goal from the very onset was not to like create a permanent hub. It was to stabilize more than anything else, because we have our friends here. This is our, this is our backyard. Our friends are stuck, so that was it. Sunday was the start, and I think we had like 20 cans of gas, and Erica's office had a handful of like canned goods in there. The next day, her office was filled like brimming, and I mean we were already distributing. I would say Wednesday was like the peak, and by the end of that week, we were already kind of like shutting it down and moving it to the longer term support.
Now, I'm fascinated, and the reason why I had you on this podcast is because the notion that a paddle sports community would be a crucial element of the response, the emergency response. I mean, it seems logical in a way in hindsight, but at the time, who could have predicted that?
So, paddlers, whitewater, and I'll say whitewater paddlers specifically because that's the community I know best. It's best practice to take rescue classes, right? Like the Swiftwater rescue class. Generally, you're going to get ostracized by the community until you do. And, it doesn't mean you have to take a formal class, but it means that you spend some amount of time learning how search and rescue works. And it's, you learn kind of the formal method, and you also learn the informal methods. But, there's an acronym that we'll teach commonly in Swiftwater Rescue. It's LAST, LAAST, and it's locate, access and assess, stabilize and transport, right? Like, and in a lot of ways, that's kind of how we follow it. Like, we figure out where the problem is, we figure out how to access that or assess that first. It depends on how immediate the need is. And then everything's about stabilization. And, the skills that we learn, we know how to use ropes, we know how to use, carabiners hardware, we know how to work around trees, we know how to work around current. We're very knowledgeable of the environment that we're immersed in. And it tends to make it, I think a lot of folks think just the river, but the river banks, the valleys, like how all of that interplays with one another. And also they're just, I will say, especially most paddlers, almost all paddlers are really gritty. Like, when you think about when they go out, their prime conditions are the crappiest weather for most other people. So they're able to withstand the elements, and they usually are well equipped for it. And I think something too that I think often gets forgot about, and that became abundantly clear to me again, is how strong and tight-knit that community is. And they really kind of galvanize in those moments.
And you're also intimately familiar with the river in a way that most people aren't.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you paddle a river regularly, you understand that geography in a very unique way, right?
Yeah. I would say that's fair. Like, there's always surprises, but one of the cool things about a river environment is it looks dynamic, but it's pretty predictable. It doesn't change in the moment, right? Like, that water is going to continue to flow that one way around that rock. It just doesn't suddenly change. Now, in the instance of the storm, things did change, right? But again, sometimes we do deal with dynamic environments. You get a large storm, a tree comes across the river. We know to be on our toes. We know you don't get too comfortable, right? You're dealing with a force that is unrelenting, right? We will always tire before it tires. It won't tire, right? So there's a respect and a reverence for it, I think. And again, I think if you go into this community and you don't really build that respect or reverence, you get called out on it pretty quick, for better and for worse. I think sometimes beginners probably get the brunt of that, and they're beginners. They don't know what they don't know, right? But there's also great mentors in our community that will take you under their wing and help kind of usher you along to where you learn those important lessons.
How big is this community? I mean, a lot of people come here every now and then from far away because the Green, especially the Upper Green, is such an amazing stretch of river.
Yeah.
But how many people are there kind of locally? How big is the paddle community?
You know, when I moved to Saluda, I was actually kind of shocked at how few paddlers actually lived in Saluda proper. You know, specifically speaking to active paddlers, I mean, I was able to count it on my two hands. Like, so, you know, during the winter months, right? Like, and we're talking about the locals, and it kind of ebbs and flows a bit. Some years you got, you know, 20, 30 that are local, and then some years you're down to, you know, 10 or less paddlers that live here locally. But I think right now we're in an abundance of that. But you have your stalwarts, right? Like the folks that are always here, who have been here for a long time and have been advocates for this river. But in the grand scheme of things, when you compare it to other communities, it's small. It's really, really small. And what's cool about that is you can be rubbing shoulders with, you know, I personally used to love reading books and stories about like first descents and things like that when we used to write books like that.
John Krakauer and
Oh,
stuff,
you know,
yeah.
anything like that, right? Yeah. And Krakauer is a great example. He writes about Everest, but, you know, we had some authors that wrote stories about some of, you know, my idols in the sport. And, you know, like Woody Calloway lives right up the road. Shane Benedict lives right up the road. You know, everybody knows those names. They're legends in the sport for a reason. And you know, I saw Shane every day during the relief efforts. He was up at Erica's office first thing in the morning. You know, Woody's down here. You know, we were stashing a lot of supplies. There was like a pod kind of near his property, and we called it, you know, Woody's corner store. But a lot of stuff was kind of going into there for the community down here. So again, not a big community, but definitely strong.
Well, I counted 40 people that were here at the gathering point before Erica sent them all off to do some work, and that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I don't know everybody in that group. You know, I think a lot of the folks this morning, for example, and these are going to be the folks that we're going to see for a longer period of time. I think these are folks that live locally.
Yeah.
I think there was probably about 6 or 7 paddlers in there that don't live locally. And that's still encouraging because, you know, here it is, we're nearing middle of December. You know, Helene happened, what was that, 2.5 months ago now? So to still see folks getting out and trying to help, I think is huge. We've got a long road. It's obvious. Like, you know, we're taking a look around right now, and we've got folks working around us right now, and what they're pulling out of the forest, like, we have piles in a matter of 20, 30 minutes already. Whereas even a river cleanup at the end of a summer after, you know, busy tourist season, we don't see this much. So it's profound. And with the profundity of it, we'll need profound help.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the big challenges involved with this river, because if you want to paddle this river, it's no longer relatively narrow, and we no longer have the controlled releases, which basically double the amount of water that you've got to play with, because instead of running all day long, it just runs half the day kind of thing.
Sure.
It's a very different river. It's a lot wider, and just where we're recording this, it looks about twice the width of
Sure.
what it did before.
Yeah.
What can we do, or should we do, to put it back the way it was in terms of being a popular paddling destination?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, there's no putting it back to the way it was. It is what it is now, right? So, like, again, this being a geologic event, it reshaped the landscape. And the thing that I continue to tell people, and I think is kind of somebody said it to me, so I'm not going to take credit for these words or anything like that, but the changes are starkly beautiful. Like, if you take the human toll and the human element out of this, like, and you go to some of the areas that don't have, like, you know, it's just forest or something like that. You don't get the debris or anything like that. It's amazing. It's really, and I keep using this word profound. There's no other way to describe it, but it's starkly beautiful. And there's some excitement to having something new. You know, we're going to mourn what was old and familiar. I think as human beings, we love what's familiar. We love the comforts of familiarity. But, you know, if you look at the quantum leaps that we take forward as human beings, it's usually when we break away from that comfortable and familiar. It's usually when we start exploring and we start discovering. And I think we're really in a very exciting way on that precipice again, right? Like we're going to have to scout rivers again. Like we're going to have to like approach the river the way we used to approach the river, which is, it was the unknown. As far as, the viability of like bringing people back to the area, I think that's a matter of time. I think the big thing here, the cleanup is first and foremost. It has to be safe, right? Like it is safe from a perspective of like man-made debris. That stuff has to get out. The river itself, having paddled down the river during a cleanup a few weeks back, the river's, it's going to be okay. And it's a free-flowing river technically, right? Like in terms of flow. And this river in this area has always had a great capacity to hold its flow well. It's one of the wettest areas of North Carolina. We're on the southern escarpment in the thermal belt. And our average rainfall is much greater than other areas in North Carolina. We're considered temperate rainforest. There's been other times where the dam's been shut off for months before, and we were operating during that time. And it's amazing how operable this section of river is from, a commercial viability perspective. Like we'll be able to float it. We will. It may not be always the same flow. We might have periods where it's lower. We might have periods where it's higher. We lose our ability to control floods, right, through the dam. But even some of the language that's coming out of like Northbrook, the dam owners, things like that. The long-term goal is to get that reestablished. I can't speak to any of that because that's out of my pay grade. But in terms of like, I'm neither glib nor anxious about it. Like I know that with some creativity, it's possible. Like I don't think we're truly. It's not all lost.
I don't think anybody's got a solid idea of what the future holds.
Sure.
But you seem relatively optimistic then that you can figure out a way to make this work again as a paddling destination.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, here's the thing. The Green River Narrows, obviously famed and fabled, right? The biggest limitation to folks paddling that right now has not been the flow. It's been access. And that comes back to that human aspect, right? So, and a respect thing. Like we have to respect the folks that are currently living here who, need to get in and out of these roads, need to access these areas for their own personal livelihood, first and foremost. So that means there's going to be times where, as paddlers, we can't just go in where access is unlimited like it used to be. But I will tell you, the folks have been paddling the river. And we get reports out of like, some folks really think the river's improved. Some folks feel, the grief that comes along with the loss of like really, like famous rapids. But, it's already happening. And, the thing is again, this speaks to how well we hold our water here. This river runs more than any other river in the area. Like, it's just, you don't see that kind of flow typically. Like you see it on the French Broad and the Nolichucky, but those are high volume rivers, right? So they're going to hold their flow much longer. But one thing that has become abundantly clear to me is that the Green does very well with its flow. I mean, again, with what we're seeing with how specific climate is affecting, like where we go into drought and, it's a feast and famine, it feels like, as opposed to kind of being spread out a little bit more. But, we've had years where we get consistent rain and the river has just always been, it's been really good. Yeah, I am optimistic in that regard. I think it's going to look different for a couple of years. It's not going to be, like the lower Green, for example, is not going to be the typical lower Green that we've seen summer after summer. The upper Green, we had 2 of our staff members paddle down the upper Green 2 days ago. They loved it. It was amazing. They said, and again, the word is that they felt that the quality of the rapids have improved. There's some areas that are going to need to have some attention in terms of like trees down for, just overall like danger, things like that.
Okay, well, It's always good to wrap up on a positive note. So,
Yeah.
because I mean, honestly, I haven't had a chance to look really closely. I'm curious about how you would do the upper green and get out, because Big Hungry is not accessible.
So Big Hungry is not accessible, but Gallimore Road is.
Okay.
Yeah, Gallimore is. And, you know, you should still have a Green River access key. Like, that parking lot is still there. And that's built for the paddlers. It's rented for the paddlers. And that's, if you need to figure out how to access or park there, you go to greenriveraccessfund.com, I believe. If you look up Green River Access Fund on Google, you'll find it. But yeah, the trail's washed out in a couple places, but it's not to a point where it's like inaccessible. And you know, if you ever knew the trail before Fish and Wildlife came in and kind of like made an actual road down there, it was like a roto-lined, really intimate trail. It's not at that point, but you know, you got the feeling of nature out there. But yeah, it's accessible. The Upper Green is accessible for sure. The Green River Narrows is accessible. It's as remote as it's ever been, because there's landslides cutting off trails, things like that. People need to go in with a wilderness mindset, both on the upper and the narrows. And honestly, right now we're just telling people not to paddle the lower because there's a lot of work going on.
Well, and how do you get out at the end of the narrows, because Fish Top is not
So
accessible.
technically you could still use Fish Top, though it's day to day because of the work that's going on in Green River Cove. But we're sitting in Big Rock access area, which is near the bottom of Green River Cove Road. So if you're going to go and paddle the narrows, or specifically the narrows, then you're gonna paddle the entire lower green as well, which is fine.
A nice day.
It is a day, yeah. And you know, the thing is, like I said, some of the convenience factor that we've become used to out here, that might not be here right now. I know that it'll be built back, and I'm hopeful that it's going to be built back in a really mindful and respectful way. I think folks, we forget things really easily, but this is one of the things that I think we're going to have a hard time forgetting.
All right. Well, let's get back to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Okay. I do like to end on an optimistic note. So here's another one. In addition to the green's geology and hydrology, one of the main reasons why the river has been so attractive to paddlers is the effective doubling of the amount of water that flows down the gorge during the day, thanks to the controlled release of water stored in Lake's summit. What used to happen is that a full 24 hours worth of flow was compressed into half a day. Without that control, long stretches of the river were too shallow to paddle. Things are even worse now that the river is sometimes 2 or 3 times wider than it used to be. Unfortunately, the hydroelectric plant at Pot Shoals, just east of Polk County, was destroyed by Helene, and the river is now running uncontrolled. No one yet knows whether anyone will come up with a plan or the money to rebuild that plant. But, and here's the good news, Northbrook Power, which owns the Lake Summit Dam, is exploring new ways of making controlled releases possible. There's a link to a Hendersonville Lightning story in the show notes. It's not much, but at least there's hope. Like all the restoration efforts, this is going to take a while. In the meantime, if you want to do something more than hope, you can always call your federal and state representatives and senators. As always, you can reach me with your comments and suggestions by emailing jamesH@folklore.com. Thanks for listening. I'll leave you with more soothing sounds from the banks of the Green.